following content contains personal experiences of our hosts and guests. We are not experts in this matter. We encourage challenging conversations with others and to achieve healing from our childhood. We hope to connect and allow a safe space to have an open discussion. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a qualified professional, diagnosis, or treatment.
I also want to say we are proud to be Filipino-American too. We're talking about our experiences.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, we're not.
Yeah, we want to establish this is not just a hey, we're complaining and it's negative. We're talking about our experience.
You're right.
But we're also proud of our heritage.
We're proud.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, proud Filipinos, 100%.
Okay.
Hold on. How do I mute myself? Hello, welcome everyone. This is a very special episode. This is our first episode of First Generation Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Tiffany, Kristie, and I'm joined here with my lovely cousin, Nina Flores. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited because this has been a topic of conversations at a lot of our family gatherings for quite some time. Just didn't have the time to connect and sit down and do it. But here we are, end of 2023, recording it. I definitely wanted to define first generation for everyone, since I know it is a topic of conversation that I've heard in the past, and people are like, what does that mean? What do you mean? Looking it up on Merriam-Webster Dictionary, just going to call it here, first generation can refer to a person born in the U.S. to immigrant parents or naturalized American citizen. For both of us, we have Filipino parents that have moved to the U.S. And we wanted to share, our journey, our experiences, and upbringing. Again, we're not experts in this. This is just talking about our experience and what we've grew up with, and want to, connect and talk about it. I think a lot of folks out there have similarities to how we were all born and raised out here in America. Feelings of displacement or just stuck in between two worlds is how I see it. Going by the culture or going by our American way. So yeah, I wanted to kick it off to you, Nina, to kind of go through our family history of how we came to be on our mom's side.
Yeah, thanks, Tiffany. So as Tiffany mentioned, our parents are from the Philippines. My mom and Tiffany's mom, my Aunt Menchie, they're sisters. And they came from a family of 13 brothers and sisters. And in the 70s, my grandfather, grandmother, and my mom and my other aunt, Ellie, they were immigrating to the U.S. And they were trying to go to San Francisco, but San Francisco at the time in the 70s were not accepting any more immigrants. So they were displaced in probably the coldest state in the U.S., which is Minnesota. And that's where I grew up. I was born and raised there. And my family, some of our family soon after immigrated to the U.S. as well. They're all over the U.S. And so my parents, started a life there. My brother and I grew up there. Soon after that, my brother and I moved to L.A., where Tiffany and her family moved to. So I'm going to let Tiffany tell that story of how your mom and your dad met and how they moved to Los Angeles.
Yes. So my parents actually met in Minnesota. So they did live through the cold weather compared to, like you said, the tropical weather of the Philippines. And so my dad got a job out here in Southern California, and got my mom to move over after he worked a little bit, and then started a family. I was born and raised here in Los Angeles. It's me and my sister, and Yeah. My mom was the youngest daughter on that side of the family, and my uncle, her brother, moved over here as well. So we were a very tight knit group. We even called ourselves the Cali Cousins. Shout out to Cali Cousins. Um, and just we were just so tight growing up, and honestly, um, as much as I think others can relate, family is very important for our Filipino culture. And so we hung out a lot, and we're all close in age that we just a lot of family gatherings, which was one of my favorite times of the year for the holidays. Is just us hanging out, you know, having fun. I'm going to toss it to you, Nina. I wanted to ask, like, since our upbringing is quite different, and I know you moved out here when you went to college, so your early years is quite different, to say the least, with mine. I know we both went to Catholic schools, right? Like in grade school?
Mhm.
No, is that
Well,
true? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's true.
So as a lot of Filipinos across the board, very religious, and Catholicism is really embedded into the culture as well. That yeah, we went to Catholic school, so that's another topic of conversation. Wanted to know, like, with you growing up, any odd feelings of, like, the people around you, not quite looking the same as you. Did you ever feel kind of out of place?
It's interesting. I get that question a lot. And I think my parents wanted my brother and I to just blend in and be Americanized. So we didn't really grow up speaking Tagalog or the language. We didn't really grow up eating the food either, because I think they just wanted us to fit in. So actually, even though I was like the only Asian girl in my class, I didn't really feel any different, because that's what I was just used to growing up there. Um, my mom experienced racism a little bit more, with one of my teachers actually in school. And everywhere we went, like people would ask her, like, "Hey, do you speak English?" But no one, I never experienced that, because, like I said, like all my friends were white, and I just blended in. Um, and so for me, actually, it's reverse racism in a way where I moved out here to Los Angeles. And that's when I experienced the racism, or I guess not racism, but it was just different because I felt like the Filipinos out here did not think that I was Filipino enough. So I was experiencing
Uh,
that culture shock. But growing up in Minnesota, I did everything that, it's a land of 10,000 lakes. I grew up camping, hiking, um, just a lot of like very Midwest stuff. So when I came out here, people are like, what? Like, that's not cool. And you don't speak the language and you don't know anything about the food. And I didn't. But to me, it wasn't my fault.
no,
I
wait,
guess it was yeah.
you know Tagalog way. No, you and your brother know Tagalog better than
I can
I. Like,
understand it, but I can't speak it.
okay,
Yeah.
same. Okay, well, okay, same.
But even then, it was
I thought
still
you were
like, you're
able
not
to.
Phil. Uh-uh. I think Mark, a little bit better
We should
at
probably
that.
add him
And
here
he's
next
not
time.
really
Give.
so much a first generation because he was born in the
I
Philippines, which I
know
forgot to
he was
mention
born in the
before.
Philippines. I know.
But I mean, he moved here when he's 3, so technically, yeah. So it was an interesting place to grow up, and I think the turning point for me was coming out here, um, for college in a bigger city, and just different cultures and being exposed to that. Yeah, so I think it was very different, but I've learned to embrace that. Um, just it's part of who I am, and that made me who I am today. So very proud of it. But yeah, I mean, first generation, and I think we should mention this too, is that like we came up with this podcast knowing that there's other first generation children out there that have experienced what we've experienced. And there's a lot of psychological stress behind that in terms of your parents wanting you to be a certain way, but also being Americanized. It's like that struggle. So we
Right.
want to talk
You're
about it.
basically split.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're split
Exactly.
between
You're
the
kind of
two
torn.
worlds.
Yeah. So imagine the psychological stress behind that. Imagine growing up that way and then kind of living your life and carrying that burden with you. And being confused is really, I mean, I was always just very confused. And so this is a safe place for us to talk about it. Again, we're talking about our experiences. We're not experts on this, but it's a place for us to share and talk about it. And it's going to be uncomfortable, but let's talk about it. So I'm really excited.
We're going deep. And you know, hitting a lot of the generational basically the generational cycle that's brought on to our parents, and just being mindful of that going forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, you hit a point very similar to me growing up here in Los Angeles, and mind you, very diverse. So I didn't, so to speak, feel out of place either. But there is that sense of, where do I belong? Which side am I supposed to be? And I know with my parents, they purposely they didn't like make my sister and I like speak Tagalog in the house. They wanted us to learn English first, so we did not. But they still spoke Tagalog to us, but they didn't just like, you know, make us use, like I've heard with other colleagues of mine that they had to speak their family's language at home, but at school it's English. You know, for us it is, they wanted us to assimilate essentially and be as American as possible. But again, they contradict it because like they were like, but you're also Filipino, and I'm like, wait, what? It's like you're telling me the
Yeah.
opposite thing. So it's growing up. It was very confusing. Thankfully, I did have a handful of Filipinos in my class growing up, and I gravitated towards them and became close friends with them. So I didn't feel alone, and I think we all kind of went through the same things, or we got picked on for similar things. You know, I just remember lunchtime, certain meals. If it is rice and chicken adobo, it's like, ew, what's that smell? You know, or like fish, like fish and rice, or spam and eggs on a sandwich. Like we didn't have normal lunches, and I actually just gravitated towards just having the hot lunch that they provide at the cafeteria, because I didn't want to get picked on or called on of like, oh, what's that smell? So we kind of like, in a sense, you know, all the Asians in my class, we just all hung out together because we had our more ethnic foods for lunch. But all I really wanted was to have pizza, you know, or a peanut butter sandwich. Um, and that was rough. That was rough. I mean, you know, I see it now, like with kids, it's a lot different. Kids are eating like seaweed, nori seaweed, or like it's more acceptable. They have kimchi with their rice. Like I'm like, oh, that's so nice that these kids are now open to these things that I did not have that growing up. So it's wild to see the differences. But that was like one of the things that I felt at school was like this odd, just because of our food, you know. And I would be embarrassed so for a long time I kind of, you know, leaned towards my American side and refused my culture. I was like totally not embracing the Filipino side of me because of growing up, and I got made fun of. So for a very, very long time, I was just like not embracing my culture. Not until I got into college, really. So in college, I joined one of like the Filipino-American clubs to just re-engage into my roots and join one of their PCN, Filipino Cultural Night, and just embraced and tried to learn more about my culture that I've kind of pushed aside for so long. You know, I was ashamed. I'm not gonna lie. I was ashamed for a long time, and now I want to just embrace and go back to the roots and be proud that I am. This is who I am. This is who we are. And like you said, we're gonna tap into a lot of this because it's not just Filipino-Americans that has gone through a lot of these struggles as a first generation in their family. So in the future episodes, we'll be exploring that with others as well.
I'm curious, Tiffany. I mean, you and I have very, very different, experiences in school. So I'm curious, like, in terms of just why did you feel like you still wanted to reject your culture, even though you had a group of Asian Americans that you can be with at school? Like, was it just talk to me a little bit about that? I'm curious.
But my high school was astonishingly split between Filipino-Americans and Armenian Americans. Like those, that
Mm.
was the highest percentage of students at my high school. So I felt like I belonged, but also was not into the Filipino culture even during high school. You know, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like,
Mm-hmm.
there's something else out there. Didn't
Yeah.
didn't really fully interest me. I think at that time and honestly, that's why I think representation matters, is like everywhere you saw in the media, it's just like we weren't we weren't our faces were not on there, so it just didn't seem prevalent that we matter or we're important. So I think that's how I just started rejecting it. Like I don't see any Asians or like where there's a token Asian, in a movie. I'm like, oh, cool. But sometimes they're stereotyped in a certain way,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and
I think you've had more of an advantage being exposed to different cultures. For me, I felt very ignorant actually growing up because like I said, I wasn't
how so?
exposed to like I think only because I was exposed to like American food and like I when I moved to LA, like I didn't even know what sushi was. Like I didn't know what Armenian people were. I mean, again, this could be just be me like not paying attention in school, but I think it was just my surroundings, and again, not necessarily my fault. But I'm glad I was able to get out of that bubble and explore other cultures.
Yeah,
And actually, growing up in Minnesota, like I would tell people at school like I'm Filipino, and no one knew what that was because like the only Asians that they knew there it was like Chinese and Japanese. So then I eventually just I started telling people I was Chinese because they were just like, "What's a Filipino?"
no
So
way.
there's so many, yeah. So I'm like, I'm just Chinese because it was just easier to like agree with
Easy.
them than to like explain. You know what I'm saying? So I think
Yeah,
yeah, there's a part of me that grew up very ignorant, and so I was ashamed of that for a long time. But again, it was the environment I was in. So I'm glad to have branched out and moved out here in LA. And it just started to get to know other cultures and ethnicities and backgrounds. Just having that exposure. So
right. No, definitely not a knock. I think your surroundings definitely helps, paint that picture. It's the same thing when
mm-hmm.
like when you first travel somewhere else, somewhere different outside of your own hometown, like that's eye opening, and that's why I encourage anyone to just get out of the bubble that they're in because there's more to the world than what is at home,
Yeah.
and just having a taste of that, I'm just like, wow, there's so much culture here. There's so many things that are different, and get that curiosity out there, that not stuck to just the one thing that you know.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Yeah, I mean there is actually like a Filipino cultural group in St. Paul that I guess my parents met some people in the immigration office like when they were immigrating to the US in the 70s, and they kept in touch. And then yes, you're absolutely right. Like more Filipinos, more Asian Americans started to immigrate over to St. Paul. And so there is actually a Filipino community there that like my parents, they're friends with that group. But I wanted to mention actually, um, there was a
yeah,
large Hmong population in Minnesota because they came from Laos. They were refugees. And so a lot of them were displaced in Minnesota. So I did want to mention that. So there were actually a few Hmong people in my class. And so they were displaced there. So I wish I was still in touch with some of my friends from elementary school that had a Hmong background, because just hearing their story would be really interesting. And being like in a refugee camp and just being completely displaced, like overnight, it seems, because of the wars that were happening there. So, anyway, I wanted to mention that. But yeah, St. Paul definitely more diverse. Minneapolis, even more so. Um, I just didn't have the chance to really grow up there. Like, I moved out here when I was 18. So, growing up there, it was very like, I just did what my parents did. I had like my small group of friends, and I didn't really branch out into like exploring the city as much as I wanted. But now when I go back, it's actually such a fun and underrated city. So have more appreciation for my hometown.
yeah, I love visiting when we go out there for the family.
Just not in like February.
Yeah, not in the winter. You
Not
know,
yeah. Like,
if it is just for a short period of time, and enjoy a
yeah.
little bit of cold. But I mean, shout out to the Minnesotan cousins.
Shout
It's cold.
out.
It's too cold.
Yeah,
I
it's too cold.
it's too cold.
Even for me.
Can't.
I've acclimated.
We're meant for the warms. I mean, that's in our DNA.
What are your feelings now being a parent to your adorable son Orion? Like, do you feel like parenting wise, like, how are you approaching that? Are you completely trying to stay away from like how our parents raised us? I mean, there's all these like superstitious things, and like when somebody's sick, like herbs and Vicks, and
Put that
like, are
Vicks
you
vapor
trying?
rub.
Oh my gosh. Like, I think that was the only
Vicks
thing my
vapor
parents like
rub.
gave me when I was sick. They're like, have some Vicks and here's some like herbal tonics. And I'm like, that's
Oh,
not.
you're telling me. Well, yeah, yeah. That's a topic of conversation because my son is sick right now, and I'm at Lola's place at the moment, and she's like, "Did you bring the Vicks? Do you have the Vicks?" I'm like, "Oh yes, yes, mom. I have the Vicks. We have like
Yeah.
5 different ones in different bags, just because of that." So some of those things I'm not gonna like say no to. Like it's harmless in a sense. So yeah, the Vicks is okay, but definitely in terms of like emotional safety and just being able to speak your truth and your voice is something I'm definitely embracing with my son, and that's something different than from what I was used to growing up. Because for me, it was just like the silent obedient type. Like you just had to
Hmm.
be quiet, do your thing, study hard, get good
Yep.
grades, obey your parents, do what they say, or else you're disrespectful. Um, that's not how I want to bring what I've experienced growing up as a child to my own kid. So I am very mindful of that,
Wow.
and trying to break that generational curse in a sense, because I can't blame. them, that's how their parents raised them too, and from their homeland, and that's how they were taught. So I think it's a lot more responsibility on my part to recognize that and hopefully change it for the generation to come for my son. So it's a lot, but just being mindful of it and aware that it's there is gonna hopefully help me raise a different kid that is, emotionally confident, strong, and will speak his truth and not be this people pleaser and got to be silent and obedient and get good grades. People. It was just I guess, yeah. I'm curious to know if you had a strict household growing up, especially because you're the youngest. So I'm the oldest in the family, the older daughter. But like, were things more lenient because you're the second child? Was your family strict? Because my parents were definitely strict on my sister and I.
Yeah, so we can bring Mark onto the show because he's got a lot to say about being the oldest.
Okay.
He'll say he was the guinea
Whoa.
pig. He never got to do anything. I was lucky, and we're 6 years apart, so he's 6 years older than me. So it's quite the gap. And I know I'm a few years older than you, Tiff. So yeah, it's like I guess I think by the time they got to me, like they weren't as strict, but my parents divorced, and my mom was a single mom, and she was like working two jobs. So like my brother and I were pretty much on our own, and she trusted us. So like if we wanted to go somewhere, we had to like figure out a ride, like take the bus, walk, whatever. We wanted to make dinner, like you just make dinner. Like we were raised to be very independent, so she wasn't very strict, but we were also really into sports because we both played baseball. I played volleyball. My brother played like all other sports, so we're just pretty much busy with that. But I mean, absolutely, it was the same upbringing in terms of like, just study, keep to yourself. I tell people now, like, I have a hard time expressing my feelings because I grew up in a household where you don't talk about feelings. Like, if you're upset about something, my
Same.
mom would be like, "Why are you upset? Just do what you need to do," And there's a part of me
Yeah.
that,
Just
like,
swallow
even
it.
at, yeah, exactly. And there's a part of me where I sort of catch myself being like that at work with people. And I'm like, why can't you just do what you need
Yeah.
to do? Like, don't talk to me about your feelings? So for me, and there's like
Be
lots
a
of therapy
robot.
going on. Yeah, it's like I need to
Yeah.
now learn how to express how I feel in a healthy way because then I feel like I just bottle up and I just but it was not appropriate to talk about how you felt about anything. It was just like just do what you need to do. Um so yeah, it was very similar to you. But yeah, in terms of like strict, I mean, yeah, she was strict in that like don't drink and don't do drugs, even though we did that anyway. um, you
Whoa, the
know, don't go
truth's
to
out there.
parties, but we would still go. You could ask Mark. He was
Yeah,
so popular in school. He was like the social butterfly,
we need
the
to bring him
social
on.
cherry. We need to bring him on. We need to bring him
We
on.
need to
But
bring him
yeah,
on. But no,
yeah. So
to your point, I think strict parents bring really great liars. Is all is all I'm saying, and which is I don't want that for my kid. Like I want my kid to be able to approach me and not feel judged. The judgmental, I think, is what also made me not speak. My truth or express myself. I'm like I have to just be quiet, or I don't want to upset them, or I don't want to get in trouble. And so,
I know.
but there's things I would do still because I wanted to and would have to find a way around that or sneak around that. Um, and honestly, I think not until I went to college is when I kind of got my voice in a sense, where I was the only Asian person in my group. I was fortunate enough to stay at for the dorms my first 2 years in college, and shout out Bayberry Hall. We I felt like I was the token Asian, and it was fun. I was like surrounded by so many different people, and and it was hard for a lot of my friends to understand, like, why do you have to why do you have to listen to your parents? You're over 18 now. You're an adult now. Like, they're
Uh-huh.
like, why are you still, you know, going with their rules and stuff like that. And so one day I did bring that up to my parents, and that did not turn out okay. Like, they were mad at me for even just speaking up. I don't even know what it was. It's probably like me trying to go to this party or something. And they're like, no, you can't go. And I'm like, but I'm old enough now. Or like, and then they're like, why? Why are you talking back to us like this? Is this your new friends? Are these your new white friends in college? And I'm just like, oh my gosh. I was like, what?
Mm.
So that was kind of eye-opening for me in that experience. It kind of just made me question more instead of just being that obedient, I have to do what I'm told.
I feel like your parents are more strict than my parents. I feel like my mom's very. I mean, the one thing I do appreciate about our family, yeah, I think our grandfather raised the women in this family to be educated, to like kind of break that the barrier between, well, I guess, like, in the Filipino culture, the male is a dominant one and the female is like submissive. So I think, Grandpa Sims, he wanted to be equal, from what my mom told me, because I never met him. He passed away like a month before I was born, but he always wanted women to have a voice. So I think my mom is a little bit more vocal than your mom about certain things, and she always encouraged me, like, not towards her, of course, like, oh, don't like talk back to her, but like in terms of like,
Yeah.
hey, you should, like, if you see something that's like wrong, you should be able to speak up and you should do something about it, like that type of thing. um, which I didn't really discover more about myself until I got older. But there's a little bit of that. So I think our parents are different in that way. Um,
And
because my mom was just a little bit more. My mom was like a little bit more like exposed to other things than your mom, I think. Because like my dad was very
I think so.
like completely like a hippie, like musician, like he yeah, they were just very different. Live very different lives from your parents. So, like, your
For
parents don't
for
even
my
drink,
mom,
or
I would say.
yeah, or your mom doesn't even
Well,
drink.
you my mom doesn't even drink.
My mom
No.
was like a social party sorority girl growing up. So, yeah.
Yeah, no.
I hope she
Mom
doesn't
was
listen to this
not.
podcast, though. She's gonna be embarrassed.
Uh, don't tell your auntie. Don't tell your tita.
I know, right?
Don't tell your tita.
Seriously. We're so excited, that you guys were able to join us for our first episode. There's gonna be obviously more episodes to come and different topics that we're gonna cover. We're gonna interview, first generation Americans, so you get to hear their stories, and we'd love to hear from you. Actually, what piqued your interest? What are you curious about? Is there anything that you want us to talk about? So let us know. We have an IG. It's at First Gen Podcast. So you can DM us, or I guess if you guys know me, you can text me. You can text Tiffany, but we'd love to hear from you. And again, this is a safe place for us to talk about this, and it can get uncomfortable, and we're not here to offend anyone. We just want to talk about our experiences and really open the room up. So,
Most definitely, just here to provide that connection, really, because I know there's a lot of folks out there that have similar experiences or different experiences that want to, add their perspective to it too. There's all different kinds of flavors to go with, but yeah, we're here to explore that and bring some connection between all of us, really. So yeah,
yeah,
catch us on IG.
absolutely.
Yeah, stay tuned for future episodes. We'll be covering a lot of different topics that we will just, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Yep.
don't bottle it up like we were
Cheers.
taught, so we're here. Cheers to that. Here I am.
Cheers to
I have
that.
tea.
Of
Cheersies.
course, I have champagne.
Hey.
Go.
Yeah.